Hello, everyone. This is Braden Kelly of blogginginnovation.com here with John Seely Brown, or JSB as he sometimes likes to be known.
Mostly known.
And John is co-author of the book, The Power of Pull, which is just out. And so I just thought I'd take a quick moment to talk with you a bit about some of the concepts in the book. First thing, now when you think about the power of pull and involving passion and people using their passion in their work, some critics might say that, well, what if I'm, the assembly line worker or something like that? Can I really be passionate, and is this really for me in terms of accelerating my contribution to the organization?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a good question because from our point of view, every level of the organization has the chance of becoming deeply passionate, because every level of the organization is actually a knowledge worker that can learn from all the unusual things happening around them to get better at what they're doing and to learn from other people around them. So we tend to think that all the thinkers are up here and all the workers are down here. But if you actually go on the assembly lines, as I spent time in Toyota, for example, the amount of thinking that's going on that assembly line by every single person, and the ability to kind of work together, to learn together, to try new things out, to actually make very precise hypotheses about what will happen if I make this change here, then go ahead and make the change, then measure the change and actually see, were they right or were they wrong, how much was the performance improvement, and so on and so forth. You really see on Toyota in particular, the workscape has become a learning scape. And they're constantly learning through these very crisp experiments they're constantly running, measurements they're making, and so on. It's kind of a very scientifically driven process, actually. And so I think you will find that, there is kind of one extreme example, but, I'm very fond of saying, and just think about it yourself, walk into a receptionist and just say something unusual and see kind of how they handle that kind of unusual response, or you make an unusual demand, or you're late and you really important for you to actually be able to get to see the guy. How do you negotiate that with her or him? And so I think you actually see that people that you think of as being rote are often the ones that are doing the most serious improvisations of anyone in the entire firm. It's actually the CEO that has a pretty kind of easy job in terms of business as usual. Is us where the rubber hits the road, that actually has to constantly improvise because little things go wrong, and little things always go wrong, and the ability to take those things in stride and actually to learn from them is, I think, key to what we're talking about.
Okay, and if we probe a little further on the idea of learning and the knowledge, and you talk a lot in the book about knowledge flows, could you speak a little bit more about the importance and the distinction between knowledge and how knowledge can expire or be copied by others, and knowledge flows?
Right. Well, we feel that there's a very fundamental thing happening right now called the big shift. And the big shift is a shift from, we're going to call it the world of managing stocks of assets, to the world of kind of learning how to participate more effectively in flows. In the 20th century, a long time ago, basically, an asset, for example, your own personal skill might last a lifetime, or maybe 20 years. Nowadays, a particular skill might only last like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and so on. The same with kind of any one piece of knowledge or any one even piece of intellectual property, by and large, may not last anywhere near the length it used to last in the past. In fact, more and more things are becoming like the fashion industry, where every 6 months, everything is new all over again. So the catch is, in this world of continually rapid change, I call it the world of flux. How do you actually thrive in this world of flux? Well, you do not thrive by trying to protect as best you can these shrinking assets that you have, or assets who have a shrinking half-life. Instead, you got to figure out, how do I constantly build new stuff? How do I find the right stuff to build? How do I get out to the right edges and participate in those edges and kind of build new ideas? And so instead of like over here, maybe sharing stuff like old knowledge management used to do, over here in the world of flux, it's a question of how do I more rapidly create knowledge? And how do I do this often with others, so we have kind of productive friction where we're actually learning when things don't work. Again, going back to my earlier point. So you learn when things don't work, and how do you create the context to really be able to make maximum value of this? So, in the book, it's interesting that we start off with, and what actually hooked me first on this theme, is looking at extreme surfing, the furthest thing from the business world. In fact, we also end with extreme gaming in terms of World of Warcraft. These are two of the bookmarks,
Right.
Both of which I'm fairly engaged in. And this extreme surfing became very interested in these, like, this small group of like 4 or 5 kids, originally 14, 15, 16 years old, that have now become all world champions in an area called Maui, which has never, ever before produced a champion. All the champions come from the North Shore of Oahu. Nobody's ever come from Maui. All of a sudden, these kids come together and say, we're going to work together. And we're going to really figure out, because we have a passionate drive to become the world's best surfers. And our story covers this trip that they have gone through, this trajectory, their own kind of personal trajectory to become from just normally good kids to these world-class surfers, where everyone in this group has now become world-class. And it's just a wonderful story of how they pulled assets from all over the place, not only learning from each other, but how they kind of studied the best DVDs, then how do they start actually engaging in this kind of act of shaping serendipity, so that they would go to the hot spots around the world, pick up ideas from them, then look at all the adjacencies around them, including, for example, skateboarding is an obvious one, motorcycling is another one, and so on. And so it's a very rich story of how these kids on their own basically transformed themselves as working as a cohort, helping each other through peer-based learning and mentoring with each other to become these world-class people. And I think it's kind of, to me, it's a particularly nice example because it showed how, being kind of still by themselves, they figured out how to use YouTube, how to use social media, how to use Skype, how to use iMovie, how to use digital cameras, etc., in order to bootstrap their own activities. And in this world, the willingness and the ability to use social media for this is tremendous.
Right, and it's also a great example of how, when you think about social media and digital technologies, that surfing isn't necessarily one of the pastimes that you would think of digital technology transforming the pastime or the industry.
Right. It's completely transformed it. And right now in the extreme surfing world, which is what we study, basically a new move made anywhere in the world will take approximately 48 hours to circulate the globe and impact the performance of every hardcore surfer around. And that is not because of broadcast media, it's not because of the internet as you usually think about it, but it is because of basically the ability to use YouTube to capture the moves, pass that around, create a social network around that, people discuss that, hardcore surfers start discussing it, and so on and so forth.
Right. So another thing I thought was very interesting from the book was, or also from your talk this evening, was making the distinction between current organizations are organized around scaling for efficiency, and organizations of the future probably are going to need to organize around scaling for speed of learning. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Right. I mean, our competitive strategy in the 20th century was based on scalable efficiency, which demanded total control, minimize any kind of variance. And so it was a lockdown game, business processes, eliminate all the waste, push, push, push. Okay, so it was a pure push-based economy, if you wish, where predictability was critical. In a world today of this incredible flux field we're constantly in because of the digital technologies driving the way we now want to work, and must work, what you really have is a total lack of predictability. You can't predict tomorrow what the market's really going to want, right, to begin with. But you also know that the skills I had 6 months ago aren't going to cut it today.
Right.
So you really have to then say, how do I structure the workscape so that in that workscape I'm constantly refreshing my skills. I'm learning brand new things. I'm learning them not just from the people around me, but from people around the world. And so this ability to be able to build the social connections around, to enter the communities of interest that really pertain to what you want to do, and to be able to pull assets together to help you bootstrap yourself becomes a key to, one of the keys to success that we talk about in the book. And we kind of go through a whole set of ways that you can actually not just do the simple notions of pull, but you can actually shape serendipity so that you can encounter serendipitously, which might just seem like good fortune, but it's more than good fortune. It actually is helping you, showing you how to shape these serendipitous events so that you get more out of them, you don't get overwhelmed by them, and so on.
Right. Well, This is some very good conversation. Thank you for that, John.
Thank you.
Again, the book is The Power of Pull by John Hagel, John Seeley Brown, and also Lang Davidson. And this has been Braden Kelly of blogginginnovation.com here with John Seeley Brown.
Great. Thank you.